Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, regardless of where you are, it's always a great time to study the gospel enlightened by Spiritism. Today we're going to review chapter 49 of the book Our Daily Bread. This chapter is entitled An Old Argument, and it is based in Acts chapter 26, verse 24. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Kardec Radio for the opportunity that it is provided to us to have conversations just like this one. Kardec Radio is available in several social media platforms, including the X platform. In the X platform, you might submit your questions or comments, and the Kardec Radio staff will reply to them with due diligence. At this moment, let's close our eyes for our initial prayer. Connect with our spiritual friends. Jesus, our friend, thank you for all the messages that you left for us. Thank you for the examples. Thank you for the guidance. Give us wisdom so we can apply all that we learn from the Gospels and from Spiritism into our daily lives. May our actions reflect what we know and what we have internalized based on Spiritism. May your peace be with us always. So be it. Again, today's conversation is based on Acts chapter 26, verse 24. Again, it's chapter 49 of the book Our Daily Bread. It's called An Old Argument. And it goes like this. At this point, Festus interrupts Paul's defense. You are out of your mind, Paul, he shouted. Your great learning is driving you insane. So those are very strong words. And there's a whole story about it. So Festus, he was what would be designated at the time as the Roman procurator. And so he had a high position in the Roman government in Judea. And he's Roman, by the way. And interestingly enough, this is the passage when Paul is being, actually, this whole chapter is Paul was accused by the Jews of acting in detriment for the Roman Empire, believe it or not. All of Paul was doing was just trying to help people and spread Christianism. But at any rate, so there was this whole accusation, and then he was in a Roman court. And then he was telling, basically what Paul was explaining that, yeah, during a certain period of time, Paul, which initially was initial name in that particular reincarnation was Saul. So Paul was actually persecuting the early Christians. However, due to a series of events, including a meeting with Jesus in spirit that comes to him, a vision of Jesus. So he changes his perspectives, and now he is one of the biggest proponents of Christianity. And of course, as he's discussing that in court, then Festus who was presiding, Festus said, "Hey, Paul, this is nonsense. Well, whatever you're saying makes no sense to me, and all that you have been studying, it's driving you insane." So that's what it is in a nutshell. And by the way, there was at the end of the trial, Festus and some other Roman representatives came to the conclusion that Paul was at no fault, that he had not infringed any laws. But the main point here, and that's what Emmanuel explains to us, is that, and this is Emmanuel's words, it is common to hear the disciples of the gospel referred to as crazy by the scientific circles of each century. So he's referring here to the whole idea of the scientific method. And a lot of those individuals who are scientists or people who have interest in science or people who have a very critical and a very methodical way of rationalize, they might classify whoever is following the gospel as crazy, as insane, because you're following something that might not make sense from a quote unquote from a scientific standpoint, which is debatable. Because if we think about science explains to us the benefits of doing good nowadays in the 21st century, we do understand that by assisting others is actually something that is healthy for the human being. Doing good, science has shown that it's healthy for the mind and for the body. And as spiritists, of course, we understand that it's also good for our souls. So at any rate, Emmanuel continues, and the argument is commonly heard from those who intend to flee the truth, complacent in their own errors. So again, it is a very good excuse for someone to say, "Hey, you're crazy," or "This makes no sense," or "You're insane," "This is illogical," what you're proposing me, and then just because he or she does not is not willing to follow the same line of teachings as explained by the gospel. And then the flip side of it, and Emmanuel explains that there are many workers who waste valuable time lamenting over being referred to as mentally unbalanced by the multitudes. This is not cause for a sterile confrontation. So see here that a lot of times many workers, commonly all of us, right? All of us who try to be Christians and also try to be spiritists, a lot of times we lament the fact that people do not understand us, and we say, "Oh my gosh, nobody understands me." People people don't agree. People don't see it the way I see it, and also sometimes we're also judgmental of others, and we believe, "Wow, I mean that individual, he's so wrong. He's in the wrong path. He's being so arrogant. He thinks that what he's doing is right, but it's totally opposite of what Jesus is teaching." So a lot of times, a lot of us, we find ourselves lamenting and lamenting to ourselves and to others about this state of affairs. And Emmanuel reminds us that on many occasions, the master, in this case Jesus, was assumed to be demented. The apostles were also thus defined. So this is a prime example, as we see here in Acts chapter 26, 24, that one of the most prominent apostles, or I should say evangelists, he was deemed as being crazy. So we see here that Jesus was also misjudged by the individuals of his time. And the apostles did not have an easy time either. So whenever we encounter situations of misunderstanding and people who misinterpret our intentions and our values, so we should not forget that this is not something new. On the contrary, it's something that's been going around ever since the inception of Christianity. Emmanuel continues here indicating to us that in one of the final arguments, we see the valiant friend of the Gentiles, Paul, facing the provincial court of Caesarea, proclaiming the immortal truths of Jesus Christ. The assembly is taken back in amazement. The noble and sincere words frighten the listeners. It was precisely at that time that Festus, acting as host of the guests, deliberately tries to break down the vibration of astonishment that had come over the atmosphere. So again, we see here that uh, Paul was being valiant because he was facing incredible odds. He was being accused in a court that definitely was a biased court in Caesarea. But his sincerity, and the commitment in his beliefs, it was actually astonishing everyone. And the frightened, the word Emmanuel used here is frightened people, because people feel frightened whenever they see that someone is doing things differently, and especially when they see that someone has the courage to do what's right, to do something that nobody else is doing, but also happens to be the right thing to do. And again, Festus at that point, he trying to break the vibration, break the astonishment of the audience. He says, "Hey, Paul, you're insane. You're not right. This doesn't make sense. You're not right in your mind." And one interesting point that Emmanuel explains here is that, but before doing so, the astute Roman realized that it was first important to justify his actions on a sound basis. How could he accuse the great converted of Damascus if he, Festus, was aware of his correct character, his sincere humility, his sublime patience, and the fierce spirit of sacrifice? So we see here that it is a bit of character. What Festus was doing is what we nowadays would define as character assassination. So then he knew that Paul was a serious person, that he had a good character. He was humble, and it was sincerely humble, and that he was patient and sublime patient. He had this incredible patience to work with all the Gentiles and actually also deal with converted Jews as well. And he had this spirit of sacrifice. He was really willing to move on and keep working for Christianity. So how do you attack that? How can you go? Because there's no argument about when we're doing good. So he remembers the great knowledge. And how does he attack? He attacks, hey, he then remembers, and this is Emmanuel explaining, he then remembers the great knowledge, and Paul was considered crazy by the divine science to which he made reference. So we see here, there was no argument. There was no argument that Festus or anybody at that time in that particular circumstance would make against Paul. And so, in lack of any ways for them to attack Paul, they were looking, hey, how can what is it that Paul has that is so outstanding that does set him apart from everybody else? His knowledge. He's someone who is very, for, many years of his life has been extremely studious, extremely intelligent. So again, he tries to use that against Paul, and say, hey, you're considered crazy by all that you're saying, and due to all the knowledge that you're saying. So it's kind of like it was basically a, 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 a very dishonest way to attack someone of good character. So we got to reflect on that, especially when we try to do what's right. We try to be honest. We try to be humble. Of course, we fail miserably most of the times because we're imperfect, but at least we for the most part, we're trying to make an effort for that, and we have some level of conscience of our need to work on that. But then people notice that, and that bothers people, because most of the people on Earth at this present stage of our planet, as a planet of tribes and autonomous, most people of planet Earth, they do not have the courage to do what's right. They don't have the courage to follow their dreams. They don't have the courage to have a commitment to good values. They are afraid to be sincere. They are lazy to try to be charitable, and they are very comfortable with their own imperfections. So with all those problems, whenever they see someone trying to do what's right, that bothers them. Because that reminds them, hey, what is it that why is that individual trying to pull ahead and to do what's right and have a courage, and I do not have the same level of courage. So it does happen, and so it it is possible that, again, when we're trying to do what's right, people are going to attack us and use those kinds of quote unquote cheap shots at us. And of course, they call Paul crazy, and they accuse other apostles of other problems, and Jesus himself was accused as well. So what should we expect? I mean, we should expect that in our scenarios as well, in our cases, in our daily lives, people are going to attack us as well. But again, it is not has nothing to do with our effort. It's just a way of individuals on planet Earth to react when they see the good, someone who was working sincerely, working towards the good for all, for himself, herself, and for all of those around. Finally, Emmanuel explains to us that, remember then the self sacrificing warrior, and do not be affected by false references from those that try to provoke you into abandoning the truth. Evil is incompatible with righteousness, and with little knowledge or with great knowledge, from the moment that you align yourself with the disciples of Jesus, you will not be free of the inferior world with its sarcasm and persecution. So, again, first of all, whenever we find ourselves being misjudged by people, being attacked by people, then it is important for us to remember, hey, it was we're not the first ones that it has haven't happened to. And again, evil is incompatible with righteousness. Again, whenever we're trying to do something good, we bother other individuals. And interestingly enough, here that Emmanuel makes reference to the inferior world, and all of us are part of the inferior world. And and again, for whatever reason, it bothers others. It bothers those people who are not making the effort. When they make someone else making the effort to strive and to do what's right, it does bother. So it might cause a reaction. But interesting enough as well that those can be both incarnate and disincarnate as well. But the most important thing is, again, just like Paul did not give up regardless of the circumstances. Paul was accused of being crazy. Paul was stoned. He was kicked out of cities. He was mistreated in different manners by people of all walks of life, but all races, all different types of from different religious backgrounds as well. So, but Paul never gave up. Paul never gave up to strongly pursue his ideals and strongly act in line with his moral values. So that is the example we should follow. Another example that we should follow of a spirit that was successful, and see this tenacity that spirit demonstrated to us by his example, by his life, and by the way he faced challenges, faced accusations and attacks from all sides. But regardless of that, he continued to work. He continued to try to promote the gospel, not only promote the gospel, but act in accordance to the teachings of Jesus. That is our conversation for today. And again, I want to take this opportunity to thank Kardec Radio for opening up their platform so that we can have different discussions similar to this one here. An interesting thing about Kardec Radio is that they are available. They actually have their own application, and which you can download in your app store of preference. But in this using this particular app, you will be able to access conversations like this one here, but in a podcast style. So make sure to check it out. This moment, let's close our eyes in prayer so that we can close today's session. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for all the great teachings. Thank you also for all those times when we believe that people do not understand us, when others attack us, whenever we're trying to do what is right. We live in a world that is still learning the meaning of good, the importance of good, a world in which all of us are still bettering ourselves. So it'll be expected for others to attack us, for others to have false testimony about our actions and our values. But the most important thing is for us to keep doing what's right, and keep studying as well, and keep also forgiving others when they misjudge us, because again, everybody is imperfect. They're imperfect, and we are imperfect as well. But the most important thing is that we are learning with one another. Thank you. May your peace be with us always. So be it.